Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Pearson Insight webinar number 9, a guide to reclaiming your levy from the apprenticeship system. We're here today because all of us are facing a common challenge, and that's the apprenticeship levy, and to be more precise, it's the implementation of the apprenticeship levy. Money is coming out of our accounts. Money needs to be reclaimed by the organisation to avoid a loss, and there's a process for that, and there's a system for that. There's an IT system for that that goes by various names, and at some point some of us here will need to log into that system and go about the mechanics of reclaiming that money. But A, how do we get to that point? And B, once we've got to that point, once we have made decisions as an organization and decided what it is that we need to do, how do we actually get in and do that? How do we make it work? In an earlier webinar, I described the system as being on a par with HMRC's tax collection accounts, and at the time it was kind of a throwaway comment, but I realise now that it actually wasn't that far off the truth. It really is an extension of HMRC's ecosystem. So today, in addition to our specialist, head of internal apprenticeships, explaining how we have set up our own apprenticeship program in Pearson, we're also going to hear from a specialist in employment taxation who has actually set up the financial side of things and configured our government gateway accounts in such a way that we can reclaim our levy to the maximum extent allowed. Now, why are we here? Why are Pearson, of all people, running this webinar today? Well, two reasons which collide together. Firstly, we're a levy payer. In the United Kingdom, we employ approximately 3,200 levy liable staff. Now, that gives us a fairly substantial levy number. I've been told by my colleague that I should not say what that is, so I won't. But you may assume that it has a number of digits in it. We're also, by happy coincidence, a leader in education. We're the UK's largest awarding organisation. We have more than 100,000 apprenticeship registrations per year, and in addition to that, approximately 1 million BTEC learners per year. And I heard on a webinar yesterday that for all types of qualifications, we mark something in the region of 30 million assessments per year in our assessment processing centre in Hellaby in North Yorkshire. Now, that's a considerable number. It makes us a market leader in apprenticeships, but it also makes it incumbent upon us to actually take advantage of this once-in-a-generation opportunity for apprenticeships. We need to be seen to be doing what we preach, and we have done so. And the following people will explain to you exactly what we've done over the course of the next hour. Just for the benefit of clarity, my name is Neil Lingo. I'm Head of Marketing for Apprenticeships at Pearson. I'm your event host, but the majority of today will be delivered by two individuals who have actually sat where you are sitting, and they have done what you need to do. And they will talk you through what we've done and the process that they used, and you can feel free to ask them any questions you need at any point. The first of those people is Anne Ashworth. She is a learning and development professional of over 30 years experience in training providers, colleges and large employers, and she's now Pearson's Head of Internal Apprenticeships. Joining her will be Viren Nehru, who is a specialist in employment taxation. He's got over 10 years of experience with Big Four consultancies, Ernst & Young and KPMG, and he joined Pearson 2 years ago, not coincidentally, around about the time that the levy came in. So I'm going to hand over now to those who know what they're talking about. To start off with, I'm going to give control of this presentation to Anne. So that's coming across to you now, Anne.
Welcome everyone. Yes, I have been and still are exactly where you are, and so Viren and myself thought that it would be appropriate to just give you a walkthrough of the apprenticeship system, but to start with a little bit of background as to where we are now from where the government started off. And they launched a paper quite a number of years ago, I think it was back in close to 2010 actually, their vision for 2020, where they wanted 3 million apprentices in learning. And this is very much still the target, and as some of you might know, the public sector has very specific targets within that. But the key is that large employers, and Pearson being one, that have a salary bill over 3 million actually pay an apprenticeship levy, and that's topped up by the government. And the thing really is, from an employer's point of view, is you want to maximise that levy money and use it for your apprenticeship training. And the key with all of this is that employers are now in the driving seat, which means that you can actually control the way that you spend your levy, who you spend it with, and how you want to spend it. And the apprenticeship system that we're going to go through today is actually the key driver for that. It's a pretty straightforward system, but there are some ways of actually learning how to manage it so that you can make it as efficient and as effective for you. Now, at the moment, the system's only available for the big employers, but the aim is that by April 2019, all non-paying levy employers will also use the system. It might have changed by then, but I think the main parameters are going to be pretty much the same as they are now. So then, a little bit of an introduction to the apprenticeship system itself. As I said, it's only levy-paying employers that can access the system in terms of using it for their levy money. However, you've got to also have a UK PRN number. You need to be registered with the Education Skills Funding Agency, either as an employer or as an employer provider. And if you're a provider, so hence you're going to be engaging with the system on behalf of an employer, then you need to be on their Register Association of Training Providers. Now, you can use the system in a variety of different ways. You can do absolutely everything in the system as the employer, or you can pass over certain tasks to your provider. They cannot access the system. They do not have full access, but there are certain parts of the system where the provider is allowed to use it, and I would suggest that you let them use it, and I will explain the benefits to you. So there are a few things that the system does, and one of the first things, of course, is that as an employer you've got to have an agreement with the Education Skills Funding Agency, and that sits in the system, and it's very straightforward. You just need to tick a box once you've read it to say that yes, you accept the everything that's within it. You can also register and maintain the PAYE schemes, and I will leave my colleague Viren to talk you through that. You can find training providers on the system, and I'll show you that, but also some of the pitfalls that come with that. You can most definitely manage all of the apprentices that you put through the system, and it's a very visual way of seeing what's going on with each of them. And you can also track the money that you are spending. So it's actually quite an intuitive system, and it's very clear which part of the system you're going into at any one time. Before I actually go into the system, though, I think there's a few things that I would just like to share with you, if that's all right. And that is that you need to have a very specific approach to setting up your apprenticeship program within your business. And there are some key lessons that we learned, and I just thought I'd share them with you. The first one is to have a very, very well structured, thought out approach to the program. We took a project management approach, which meant that we could plan in great detail. We could bring all the key stakeholders into play. We could think about our systems and our processes and really start to have an embedded approach to the apprenticeship within our, if you like, everyday working practices. And when I talk about stakeholders, I'm talking about recruitment, talent acquisition, HR, L&D, finance, data systems. All of them were involved in the project and more besides. I think that also then naturally leads that you will have an integration of systems, and that can be difficult, and it certainly wasn't easy for us as we are a global organisation. But where we could, we used our systems within the business to inform what was going on with the apprenticeship program. So for example, our HR systems, the L&D systems lets me know what the apprentices are doing from an L&D perspective. And I can also plan training that they can do through our L&D program in addition to what they're doing on their apprenticeship. We also wanted to make sure And I think it's really critical that your apprenticeship is not a standalone. It's a natural part of your workforce development strategy. It's part of your talent planning. It's part of career progression. So a lot of work was done with our HR team to ensure that that actually came to pass. And that's certainly something that has borne great results. Make sure that you've got a very robust and solid procurement process for your partners. There's a lot of organisations out there, and you can see that from the number that have registered on the ROAPP system. You need partners that I would suggest are not just very good at what they do, but also have a similar approach to the apprenticeship programme as you, that really invest in your values, understand your culture, and are prepared to work with you in a transformative type of relationship rather than a transactional one. Again, if you work hard on that, and we've done that, we're beginning to see definitely the rewards as we work together to move the programme forward and improve it further. And also have a strong quality assurance system. We tap into systems that already exist within the business because, you know, they work for the business, so why wouldn't they work for an apprenticeship programme? But also don't forget the training partners that you're going to be working with will also have their own quality systems, and they will also abide by Ofsted or QAA if they're higher education institutions as well. So for me, those are the key things to bear in mind as you're thinking about what you're going to do with your apprenticeship money. So in terms of 5 top tips, I think, you know, plan thoroughly across the business. Definitely map your learning and development where you can to the apprenticeship standards, and you might not be able to do that at the very beginning, all of it, but that's absolutely fine. You can continue to do that over time. Work very closely with finance. Vera and I have worked exceptionally closely on getting this up and running and continue to do so, and use the experts around the business. Make sure your communication is clear and concise into the business. Have some really good ambassadors for the apprenticeship programme at all levels of management, and very much use your senior leadership team to communicate the benefits of apprenticeships into the business. It won't work unless you've got all managers at all levels really understanding why you're doing it and the benefits that they and the individuals going on the programs are going to see. And certainly we invested an awful lot of time and energy in the actual line managers of the apprentices, because they're the ones that really are important in terms of motivating apprentices and working with the training partners.
Okay, thanks for that, Anne. For the next section, I'm just going to change presenter to Viren, who's going to talk us through some of the financial aspects.
Thank you, Neil. Hello and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Viren Nehru, and I look after employment taxes for the Pearson Group. And as Anne and Neil have alluded to earlier, my involvement in the apprenticeships program was focusing on the tax elements, given the levy is a tax, but also encompassing wider initiatives under the finance umbrella. And I'll explore more of that with you in a short while. I'll start off by setting the scene with the levy for those of you who may not be fully aware of what that entails. So the levy is payable where an employer's annual pay bill, which is all the salary, bonuses, etc., exceeds £3 million. The levy itself is subject to a £15,000 annual allowance, and the allowance is awarded per group of connected companies. For this purpose, connected companies are those with a shareholding of more than 50%. The rate of the levy is 0.5% and paid to HMRC through payroll submissions. To make things seem simple, it's just as if though you were paying an additional element of employers' national insurance contributions. The apprenticeship levy is governed by the same regimes covering PAYE, which is the payroll withholding tax regime we have in the UK. As a result, it's subject to penalties for non-compliance and senior accounting officer governance. And the other main point to flag here is HMRC, on receipts of the levy funds, will allocate them proportionately to the devolved nations. The way they will go about allocating the funds is based on employee residential postcodes. The English funds will be made available and administered through an online portal. Within this portal, the government will top up 10% its investment, and employers will have 2 years to use the funds on training costs for apprentices. On this slide, we're highlighting some of the key stakeholders involved in shaping an apprenticeship program. Yours may be different, possibly more, possibly less, but I'm going to pinpoint a few of the key considerations with these interested parties based on our experience. This list is in no particular order. We'll start off with payroll. Do ensure that all payrolls, whether internally managed or outsourced, are geared up for paying the levy. Also determine which payroll or payrolls will claim the £15,000 levy allowance. Particular care needs to be given to those payrolls which may have no or limited liability arising as a result of individuals within being exempt from Class 1 national insurance. The classic example is expats and assignees. Group 2, tax. At the end of the day, the levy is a tax, and therefore the tax departments should be involved in order to ensure the operations of the levy are in line with the corporate tax strategy and controls. If your organization has an employment tax specialist, the recommendation is to involve them as much as possible. Group 3, finance. There's a wide raft of issues that need to be discussed with finance. You may need to think about how do you go about accounting for the levy, the treatment, and whether that's satisfactory from your internal accounts perspective, but also in line with accounting regulations and corporate tax regulations. But it could be simpler things such as ensuring that your finance business partnering teams are budgeting for the levy. Group 4, HR. Understand and agree with strategy, as Anne mentioned earlier, for apprenticeships, and see how this fits in your company's learning and development framework. In the process of embedding new ways of working in relation to your apprenticeships program, do seek alignment of this HR strategy with the rest of the organization. Group 5, company secretarial. It's important to understand your company structure. And if you think about large corporates or even multinational corporates, there may be some complications of how the companies are set up in terms of shareholding. This would help determine how the £15,000 annual allowance will be split and in how many ways. In addition, the company secretarial team will be able to assist you with company's house numbers, which is required for setting up your online portal. Group 6, procurement. Your company's procurement process may assist with effective vendor selection and management, i.e. your learning provider. And as Anne mentioned, you need to be able to work out what you really want to get out from your learning providers, what kind of learning providers you would like to work with, and procurement will be the best placed team in your organization to start with. Group 7, legal. Discussions will be needed on how the levy part will be used across the group. If you have a complex corporate structure, this will be very imperative because you will need to determine which groups will be allocated the levy funds first for use in apprenticeship training. In addition, the legal team will also need to be involved before the ESFA funding agreement is entered into. And last but not least is technology. Do consult with technology on the mandatory use of the online government platform and establishing internal controls that may be needed as a result, for example, around data privacy. I'll summarize this section by highlighting 4 key tips based on our experience. The first is get the compliance right with the levy. Non-compliance will result in issues around penalties, reputational risk with HMRC, and senior accounting officer issues. More so, you may be left in an uncomfortable position whereby you will have inadequate funds to support your program. Number 2, understand your internal governance and controls, which will have an impact on how you structure your program. Number 3, identify your stakeholders. And going in hand with this is number 4, establish processes. Develop a RACI matrix so it's clear who is responsible, accountable, who is consulted and informed in respect of activities associated to the running of an apprenticeship program. We will now walk through the online portal, and we've got example screenshots that Anne and I will share and explain what you can expect to see in the online portal. The portal has different names, often referred to as Gateway, sometimes Digital Account System, or DAS for short, or simply the Apprenticeship System. All of those names refer to the same tool. The tool was devised by the ESFA for English usage of apprenticeship levy funds in partnership with HM Revenue and Customs. Within the tool, employers can record their apprentices, register their payroll schemes, and enter into the official agreements with the ESFA for funding of the apprenticeships program. Due to the confidential information contained within this system, it is widely recommended to implement it and operate it internally. So on visiting the website, you will land at this page. You have the option of signing in if you have used this service before, or you can proceed in signing up for a new account. For first-time registration, you will need your company's house number, and in addition, the government gateway login details for a payroll scheme associated to that company. Once in the system, on the organizations page, you can add companies within your group to set up your accounts. You can have one account per company or one account across the entire group. This is completely flexible and down to what is preferred for your organization. On this page, there is also a section to enter into the funding agreements with the ESFA. The PAYE schemes page lists your payroll schemes, and you can add schemes as and when needed. You're essentially saying that levy payments from these payroll schemes should be allocated to this apprenticeships account. The page also shows the proportion of employees based in England within the registered payroll schemes, and this will give you an indication of the levy funds you should expect based on your payroll reports.
Okay, so just one question there, Varen. You said it's highly recommended that you do this internally, but people like you are quite rare. There are tax specialists. There aren't that many employment tax specialists. So if an organisation is in a position where they have a non-specialist responsible for this, can it be outsourced to a specialist? Is that actually practical? And is that something that we would recommend, suggest?
Short answer is no. We would not recommend it, and I personally would recommend it. The reason being, sorry, I was getting a little bit of feedback. The reason being, when you're setting up an account, you have to provide the government gateway login details for a payroll scheme. The payroll scheme is an employer reference number. So if you are in a position where you've got an outsourced payroll provider, your payroll provider will have their own login details, and strictly speaking, the employer should have their own login details. If you don't have one, you can proceed in setting one up. But if you were to outsource the setup of your online account to a provider, whether it's a tax advisor or a payroll provider or a learning provider, the risk is that you're disclosing everything you have within your payroll system to that third party, and that's the risk.
Okay, so they can do it, but they need to be comfortable with that risk.
Absolutely correct.
All right, thank you very much, Varen. I'm just going to hand over now to Anne for her to continue with the next section.
Right, I'm going to take you into the system now, and this is the elements of the system that I use on a regular basis. So it depends how frequently you want to go into the system. You can go in weekly, you can go in monthly, or you can do cohorts, which is actually what we've decided to do. But firstly, you've got to make sure that you've got the right people set up as users of the system. And I think the key here is to make sure you don't have too many people, but make sure that you've got the right people. So for example, you'd want somebody like Viren absolutely in the system. from a payroll point of view and PAYE. You need somebody who can approve the apprenticeship information, so that might be somebody like myself, or it might be that you have an administrator. But you certainly wouldn't want too many people involved in that. And of course you can change that around and you can add more people in. And this is the look of the screen when you go into this section. So you're in your team and you can see there that we have 2 people that are set up. We do have others, but for the purpose of today we showed you this. And it says exactly what they have permission to do. And again, you have different levels of permission within the system, and you need to be careful about how you allocate those permissions out. This is an automated email that is part of setting up the users as well. So you send it to the person that you are inviting to join the system, and you say there what sort of access that you're going to give to them. And this is the look and feel of the system all the way through. So as Neil said, it's got very much that HMRC feel, that very much that direct.gov. Get your words in the right way. direct.gov.uk website. Goodness me. So yeah, it's not fancy, but it absolutely does the job for you. Right, I thought we'd go into training providers in the first instance. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that this is your first port of call. However, what has happened with the system is any provider that is on APP that is approved to work with levy paying employees will be sitting in the system. So if you want to find a training provider, you can absolutely find them here. However, and I've done a few tips for you, the information within the system is really limited. So I would also have a look to see if perhaps they might have an Ofsted inspection report. Perhaps they've been working with another organisation, in which case you might find them sitting in another inspection report. So 2 ways. You can either look for a provider that you know the name of, or you can actually try and find one. And that might be based on the type of frameworks or standards, i.e. the apprenticeships, that you want to offer within the business. And this is sort of one of the pictures of that particular menu. So for here, for example, I put in a particular apprenticeship, team leading level 3. And as you can see, the search yielded welding for some reason. Absolutely no idea, but I mean, if you do that, you'll find welding comes up. It wasn't me and a mishap on the keyboard. But you can see there that I have got management team leading and management team leading also in construction. If you click on that title, it will actually take you into the actual apprenticeship, and then will list for you the training providers that offer those apprenticeships. Now, a word of caution for you, you will find providers on that list, and it also shows you how far away they are from where you might want the delivery. But just be aware that some providers have literally ticked every box. So when you ring them to find out if they can deliver, for example, management team leading, in my experience, I found some who say, well, no, we're not planning on delivering apprenticeships. Or some that say, actually, management team leading, no, that's not something that we do. So
if I can come in there, Anne, and just link up with something that Viren said, it sounds to me as though this looks a little bit immature in terms of the provider finding search capability within the system. So would you both recommend that this is something that you need to do offline, and then find the providers that you've selected through whatever procurement process you have in the system after you've already made your decision?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I would not use this as the main focus of finding your training providers. Absolutely not. It helps you to identify the potential ones that are in the geographical location, but from there I would straight away go to the Ofsted website and look to see if there's any history about them. Go to their websites themselves and have a look at what they're about, and also look at the reputation that they have.
So you could use it for shortlisting perhaps, but...
Yeah. It's not your primary tool, absolutely not, but it has a place. And if you were struggling to find, for example, I used this as a starting point to find creative media organisations, and then I moved into Ofsted, I then moved into reputation, etc. It was a starting point, but it's certainly not the be all and end all, most definitely not. Right then, so probably the most important bit is actually adding apprentices to the system. And before you can even do that, you need to know the UK PRN number for your provider. Now, all your providers will be linked to you where you have an agreement with them, and literally it's a menu and you click on the provider that you wish to deliver the particular apprenticeships that you're going to enter into the system. And unfortunately, again, in terms of the robustness of the system, you have to do this every time you want to upload an apprentice or group of apprentices. And actually we've found the easiest thing to do is to load a cohort of apprentices, so i.e. a group of apprentices at one time. However, word of warning, when you go to enter a group of apprentices, do it in one sitting, because if you have to come out of the system, you'll find that you can't add more apprentices into a cohort. You will have to actually start a new cohort. Possibly not an issue, but it does have a different reference number to it. I think the other thing that I would say there as well is that we would actually get our training partners to add in the apprentices to the system, and I'll explain how that works in a minute. But here's the page that comes up that basically reminds you that you need the UK PRN number. You need to know who the organisation is that you're going to be using. And then here, are you going to add the apprentices, or are you going to ask your provider to add the apprentices? Now, a little bit of trial and error, but what I would recommend is that you get your training provider to upload the apprentices for you. And there's several reasons why I say that. Firstly, they know the unique learner reference number, and you possibly don't at this time. They have also done the enrolment paperwork, so they will know the ILR start date and end date, so if you like, the very formal start and end dates that go to the ESFA. And also, they have a very clear picture as to what they're trying to enter, where they're trying to put it, and they have people trained up to do that. We also found that if we entered it, then it has to go through several different approval processes. So for example, if we entered apprentices and got it wrong, the training provider would reject it, it comes back, we have to amend it, if we get it wrong again, it comes back, etc. Whereas if the provider does it at the beginning, you're more likely to have the absolute accurate data in there. So all you need to do is go in, check it, and approve it. And there you go. So that, in a nutshell, is what you're looking for. And we've just found that that probably cuts out a couple of levels of approval, which means it speeds up the process. It also ensures that you've got really good communication with the training partner. So one tip for you is do look at the length of program that your provider is allocating to each of the apprentices. There is a guide on the apprenticeship framework document and also on each standard, but do make sure that the endpoint assessment has been allowed for. And one thing that we've decided to do in conjunction with our partners is to allow at least 3 months for endpoint assessment. Until such time as our apprentices have gone through it, we're really guesstimating, I suppose, at how long the endpoint assessment might take. So we think 3 months is about right, but as they start to go through endpoint assessment, we will adjust depending upon what we find. There is a very useful dashboard that comes up, and this is this one, and it really is that communication with your training provider. So it will tell you in here whether you have anything ready for review, any cohorts perhaps that are coming through from your training providers that you need to approve. Now, the ESFA is hoping to have that in linked to email addresses so they can give you an alert. So if you're in the system, you see it, that's fine, but if you're not in the system, then you don't actually know this is happening. That's another reason why we've gone with cohorts, so that we know there are certain points in the year when there will be a lot of activity in the system, so we have it open and we're responsive. But if you're constantly adding apprentices in, you're going to have this open the whole time and be working constantly with it, with many cohorts, each of them with their own reference number. Moving into some more of the mechanics of the apprenticeship program, and this is the real detail that you can see. This gives you in two slides here, two views, the whole list of apprentices in a particular cohort, and you'll have their names, their status, and then on the right hand side you can actually go into each individual learner and check the apprenticeship that they're on, their start date, their end date, how much money is being paid. As you can see there, this particular apprentice is on an old framework called Sales and Telesales Level 2, and it only pays £1,500. But that is something that you've got an agreement with the training partner that is the top of the band for that particular apprenticeship, and it lists it there, so you can clearly see just how much money you are paying for each of your apprentices. Here is also where you can check that the information is accurate. You can edit, as you can see, and if also you have learners that perhaps leave the business or don't wish to continue with the program, then it's in this element of the system where you can go in and terminate them or put them on a temporary break if perhaps they're on maternity leave or long-term sick leave. So this is very much the hub of the system in terms of everyday use. This particular slide does what it says, and I'm going to hand over to Viren.
Thank you, Anne. This possibly, from a selfish perspective, is the most useful page for me. It's all about the money, the finances, etc. On this page, you can see the funds sitting in your pots, and there will be a functionality made available at some point in the future, whereby you'll be able to see those funds you're about to lose as you come close to the 2-year mark since the money first went in. You can also see the payments going to your subcontractors here, i.e. your learning providers. For confidentiality reasons, we've blanked out the names of providers, but essentially the negative amount you see there is the payments going to our learning providers for the apprenticeship training costs. You also have the option within this tool to prioritize the order in which the subcontractors are paid. If you are an organization in a position where the levy pots will fluctuate month in, month out based on, for example, stock options or bonuses, i.e. things which are not regular base pay, you can prioritize which learning providers should be prioritized in terms of paying their costs for apprentices. This page also has some use from a HR and apprenticeships management perspective, and I know for a fact Anne uses this to monitor what we are paying our learning providers and when.
Right, I just thought I'd do a recap. So firstly, and this is all around the system itself. So in the first instance, who in the business should be given access to the system and to what level? I think that's really important to make sure you've got the key people participating in that, to make sure that you've got some good support, good expertise around the system. Make sure you've got someone like Viren who understands PAYE and how it all works with the HMRC. Most definitely make sure that you know the providers that you're going to use, how you're going to work with them, how you want them to engage with the system, and make sure they're comfortable in doing so. And that means, are they happy to actually upload the apprenticeship data? And I think, you know, most importantly, as an employer, and as an employer or even as an employer provider, make sure that you're fully conversant with the funding rules. You have signed an agreement with the ESFA that holds you accountable in terms of audit, in terms of making sure that that money is used appropriately for the elements of the levy that are within the funding rules. So you've got to make sure that you really do understand what it is you're buying and what also you have to enter into other agreements with your providers for. Your providers in turn also have to sign agreements with the ESFA. So from a procurement point of view, a back-to-back contract is probably not a bad idea in terms of procurement. And thank you very much for listening to us.
Okay, thanks very much, Anne. I'm going to keep the chat window open for questions to come in. So this is an interesting one. What happens when someone leaves the organisation? I'm sure this must happen with apprentices. They must leave, Have the rules changed from what it is currently?
No, not at all. If you have somebody that leaves the organisation and you've already signed them onto the apprenticeship programme, if they leave within the first 6 weeks and then they're not classified in any of the data for success and achievement that the training partners have to pull together, and you just exit them out of the system, there is, as I said in that managing apprenticeship piece, there is a feature that you can edit, so you can actually exit them there. They can exit at any time. Obviously, you don't really want that. We take the position that if an apprentice wishes to leave, we will do everything we can to ensure that they gain as much as possible. If they are leaving the business and wish to carry on with their apprenticeship with another employer, then we will actually hopefully be put in touch with that employer and see whether we could help that apprentice continue their apprenticeship program with that new employer. So they'll come away from us, they'll no longer be part of our levy pot and our PAYE, but they'll transfer to the new employer and possibly use the same training partner or possibly a different one. That's entirely up to them. But we certainly, and you certainly can't, as part of funding rules, have a return on investment. So if anybody leaves, there is no funding to be pulled back, no money pulled from the apprentice whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Vera, anything to add from that from a financial point of view? Are there any implications of people leaving the program midway through?
Nothing in particular to mention. The only thing I would say is the implications from a PAYE perspective for a leaving apprentice would be exactly the same as a normal employee.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hang around for a few more minutes in case any other questions are coming in. Just while I do that, let me give you a few hints and tips about where you can find further resources. So a couple of people have asked me during the session, will the slides be made available and will the recording be made available? Yes, the slides will be emailed to everyone who attended, indeed everyone who registered and couldn't make it. So that will happen within the next 24 hours or so. The materials are belatedly uploaded into a tab to the right hand side of your window. My apologies, I thought I had done that, but I realized I had then made a correction to the slides and taken them out. I've now put them back there, and you should be able to download them and take them away. The recordings of the events, and indeed a great deal more information besides, you can find on our website quals.pearson.com/apprenticeships imminently, I would say. We are about to publish some much updated information. Previously, I think our website has been for the initiated only. It's which standards, at which levels, and which qualifications go into it. If you are an employer, hopefully you will find the revised website a little bit more useful. We're trying to look at things more from your perspective to explain some of the key concepts and considerations you need to think through before implementing an apprenticeship program, as well as outlining what our service offer is. And of course, in addition to these events, we're going to be running more of these over the course of the next few months. If you need any help and advice, I'm sure that there are colleagues of mine who would be very interested to talk it through with you, and you can find their contact details via that same web address. So if there are no further questions, everyone, that probably concludes today's business. We'll stay on the line for a couple of minutes, just in case you want to chat through something privately. You can use the chat window to the bottom right. But I thank you for your attention today. I hope you found it useful, and good evening.